Welcome to the Furthermore podcast. Hey everyone, you don't want to miss this. I am so excited to have my childhood friend, my best friend to this day, Mr. Sid Pandey. I'm really excited to have you here. Sid is a really awesome, inspiring professional. I'm going to have him tell you all about his journey. Sid, how are you?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Doing great. So for folks that don't know, I have known Sid since I was in diapers. I don't know, like that, just like really early on, age 3, 4,
Yeah,
or 5, somewhere
been
in
a
there.
while.
Yeah, we might have met before we even knew how to communicate in any language whatsoever, frankly. Um, yeah, Sid, tell us what you do today professionally and how you got to where you are.
Sure. So I am a geospatial consultant, geospatial and technology consultant. So I work for an engineering firm that does a wide variety of things, but I work in our geospatial and technology services group, and I get to apply that background to a variety of things. So I work in the emergency response world, so I support FEMA in a lot of the disaster response work that they do. I do a lot of state and local GIS work. I get to do some asset management, a variety of things. So it's really fun to be able to apply what I learned in college in so many different ways.
Definitely.
With my job. So yeah.
Yeah, and can you unpack like what that journey was like in college? How did you encounter GIS and geospatial engineering? What was that like?
So it's funny. And when I was applying for schools, I really wanted to be an engineer. I guess I didn't really understand why. I was interested in like sustainable development and stuff like that, and I thought, engineering might be the route to go. And at the time, Penn State had this event where before you like commit to the program, you go up there and you get to meet with some advisors and stuff like that. And I met with one who told me about the Earth and Mineral Sciences College at Penn State, because we were having a conversation about my interest in sustainability. And so he told me about the different programs that were there. And so as I was committing to Penn State, and before I had even started classes, I'd already changed my major to environmental systems engineering.
Mm-hmm.
So then about, I think the first year or so was, pretty much gen ed classes. And so I liked most of what I was doing, but there was some aspects of it that I didn't really enjoy. And I can't remember if it was the end of my freshman year or the beginning of my sophomore year. My advisor at the time recommended that I take one of the intro to geography classes. And I took that one intro class and absolutely loved it. And since then it just kind of snowballed into the more advanced geography classes, and then kind of made the switch into GIS, which is kind of the when you infuse kind of IT into geography. So
Right.
yeah, I kind of fell into it.
Yeah, very cool. Growing up, I think that all of our experiences, I feel like, has this like nature element to it. It's I feel like our best times are like outdoors, usually along the lines of like hiking or going to the zoo or something nature oriented. Would you say that sort of your growing up, like your experiences outdoors informed your interest in the field that you're in today?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I was literally just talking to my mom earlier today about how surprised we were that we've kind of developed like a love of being outdoors. I think, since quarantine happened, I can't even count how many times we've gone out hiking on the trails nearby. But, growing up, our family kind of fostered that interest in being outside. I just naturally kind of gravitated towards being outdoors, and
Right.
and then of course, with geography or GIS, location is everything, right? So being able to find your way, navigate stuff like that, being able to read maps and just kind of understand how to orient yourself in the world,
Right.
just kind of became part of who I am, and now I get to apply that in my work.
Definitely. Yeah. I would say, since you brought up the ongoing pandemic and sort of the implications, like it's freed up more time for me to simply walk outside. As you know, I'm with my folks, and we're in a very spacious suburb, so uh, that provides opportunity to just be outdoors and kind of enjoy that. Would you say that that might have been a bit of a silver lining for work, in the sense that, with the pandemic, most folks are working remotely, and that might provide more opportunity to be outdoors, or is it not so much of a change?
Um, I would say it's been a benefit. I think I've probably been outside more lately than I probably would have been. Obviously, I'm fortunate in the fact that I get to work remotely,
Right.
and like you, I've been spending a lot of time at my parents' place as well. And so I think I'm working as much as I normally would have, but I'm able to, at least, with the commute, I'm saving time there. And just like, since so many other activities are not happening right now, I've been able
Hmm.
to really just spend a lot of time outside. And it's actually funny because in the neighborhood we're in, we've been here, I think, almost 10 years now, and we had no idea that there were all of these trails within walking distance of us. So we've gotten a chance to explore stuff literally in our own backyard that we had
Nice.
no idea that existed.
Awesome. That's fantastic. So, taking a step back, like, you know, to focus more on your career and sort of your job, you're employed full time. For folks that may not know, like, I am undergoing a personal career change, and I am trying to kind of understand uh, my own interests, and among my interests, sort of what is what opportunities are out there, particularly in the scope of like full time job opportunities. And I think a big aspect of that is professional development, understanding norms in a corporate environment, and in the conventional workplace. Could you talk about maybe your journey from college to the workplace, and maybe the adjustments and the learning that took place of like the college environment to the workplace environment and the corporate culture and whatnot?
Sure. So I would say I didn't have a huge adjustment to make, mostly because I had an internship pretty pretty much since my senior year of high school that I kept through college. So every,
Mhm.
every summer, every winter break, basically any extended break from college, I'd go back, and work there. And that, I was an intern in the federal government, so a little different than the corporate world I work in now.
Okay.
But I still had that experience of, what is it like to work in a professional setting, and take part in meetings, and how you conduct yourself with various folks at various tiers in an organization. So
Hmm.
I kind of developed that, and then in college, I did some small work for different departments in my college,
Hmm.
and then my senior year, probably one of the highlights of college for me was actually working for the club sports program. So I actually
Right.
was a student supervisor and got to supervise different club sports that were happening, and so I got a good taste of leadership, working with my peers, working with the other kind of, I guess, the directors
Hmm.
of the program. So I had a lot of experience built up in, I guess, in the working world before I transitioned into you know not being in school anymore and working. I think the biggest change for me was when I graduated, I got a part-time position in city government. So I was doing GIS work for them, and it was fairly similar to the work I had done with my internship, in terms of the organizational setup. But then about almost a year into it, I got my current job, which was my first full-time job. And like I said, I think I brought a lot of my experience with me, and just, how do you conduct yourself in a professional setting, and
Right.
um, how to uh, how to communicate effectively via email. Um, but I think the one thing that I struggled a little bit with initially was, I went from working with really small groups to a fairly large group, and
Mm.
the company I work for now has like over 50 offices across the country, and I think roughly 2,300 employees.
Mhm.
And so there were a lot of times where I was, I had to meet with somebody who was in a completely different office and on a
Mm.
completely different side of the country, um, and
Gotcha.
also people who had a very different background. In a lot of my previous work, I was talking with people who did the same thing. They were part of the same exact projects. But with my company now, I have to interact with people who don't do GIS. They're like doing something completely different, and so I'm trying to understand what they're doing. They're trying to understand what I'm doing, and so those things like, your elevator pitch, right? How do you
Right.
effectively explain what you do or what you can bring to the table to somebody, in a 30-second, 1 minute conversation, right? Those
Yeah.
kind of things were a little difficult for me at first, but I was really fortunate. I had a great team when I first started, who kind of helped shake the rest of the newbie out of me,
Gotcha.
when I first started.
Yeah.
Um, and I got to pick up some of those things, like how do they explain what our department does? How do they explain um, how GIS could be applied to environmental science, or how it could be
Right.
applied to asset management or something like that? And so I started to pick up on those things and kind
Right.
of make my own, like hybridized version of that.
Gotcha. Very cool. Yeah, I've yet to have experience with such a size wise, like a big team. The first job I worked in, uh, the company was originally very, very small, and it was in a small office in Rockville. Then it got acquired by a larger company that was headquartered in Japan, technically. Um,
Wow.
and but we weren't really reporting to the company that acquired us in the transition period. So I was kind of sheltered, more or less, before I transitioned out. And it's
Right.
it's always, I think it's worth mentioning. As you know, I'm a bit more of the artistic type. I've been taking this personal sabbatical of sorts for a number of months in the stand-up comedy space. And although we're a bit more on like the abstract side of things, a lot of us are artists. A lot of us as a community, we have day jobs, and a lot of comedians are effectively able to balance, their 9 to 5 kind of commitments and the time outside of that. And so it's sort of my personal goal to get there, because even in comedy, we're ultimately dealing with people. We're coordinating, we're collaborating, we're solving problems, and the same holds true fundamentally in the workplace. Something I was super impressed with is your time at Penn State, with the club sports accolades, and the fact that Penn State has such an established like space building office for club sports. Um, could you talk about, like, do you have an idea as to how that came to be? Because when I went to College Park, our club sports, I don't know that we had. We certainly didn't have a devoted building. We might have had a couple of offices, and maybe in one of the gyms, and maybe in the student union. But how did that come to be at Penn State? How did the club sports presence become so big? Do you know?
Um, I, I have to say that, the people that ran the program are just absolutely fantastic. They're to this day some of my, best friends, and still, rely on them, for advice and things like that. Anytime I reach out to them, always get good advice. Um, I would, s- I guess it's kind of tough to say how it's gotten as big as it has. I mean, I
Mhm.
think there's a lot of people who are really, who are just really passionate about, whatever that club or activity is. I mean, I
Right.
was I was kind of blown away. So I didn't know until probably the beginning of my senior year, when I became part of the, like the student supervisors for the program, was that Penn State actually has the largest club sports program, at least at the time. I think it still is now, in terms of the number of clubs.
Mhm.
And it was incredible to see the variety of clubs. I mean, just there's just so many different types of things. If you can think of it, there's probably a club for it. Um,
Gotcha.
and I think it's just people who are really passionate about it. And when I first went to Penn State, everyone told me about the family feeling, and it's not a lie. Like, you really
Gotcha.
do feel like you're part of a family. And within that big Penn State family, there's a bunch of others, whether you're, part of Greek life, or you're part of just any general club or club sports. So I
Right.
just think, the passion of the people involved kind of helps it grow.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, at College Park, I was confronted with a number of struggles when I was participating in club sports. Particularly, I did club soccer for a year, and I was also climbing the kind of leadership ladder in boxing. I was secretary of the boxing club, and then eventually vice president. It was a big struggle, and it might even be to this day, to find space where we were permitted to spar, and if that space wasn't available, or if we couldn't carpool to a spot sort of off campus, you'd kind of have to do it under the guise of, oh no, we're just shadow boxing. My latter 2 years of college, I was much more involved, particularly my fourth year, the senior year. I was involved in kind of the Asian and Asian American organizations and that larger umbrella. Um, uh, that cascaded into me kind of getting like random roles and parts and maybe like skits and plays for like the different Asian student groups. A couple of things, not surprisingly, for the Indian Student Association, but some but some other cool, like I got like sort of small roles in like a play for the Vietnamese Student Association,
Very cool.
and the Bengali Student Association. I was really intrigued at the time. Like, there was a professor in like uh, I think it was like the history department, or the American Studies department, and she was piloting like an Asian American Studies course. And I think within the past couple of years there was a minor. So I think the sort of the resources and power, I perceived a higher level of that in sort of the cultural groups at Maryland. But there was a bit of a struggle with we kind of had to fight for resources and money and time. Just from my personal experience with the sports aspect at College Park. Um, so
Yeah, there was a little bit of struggle's not the right word, but there there was like some pretty clear rules and regulations that we had to follow, and then there was guidance, especially from the funding perspective, or getting practice times and space to meet and stuff like that, where there's certain amounts, like certain types of events you have to hold, and a number of those
mhm,
to qualify for additional funding every year. Like, we had to basically do like a budget for ourselves, like what did we spend this year, what do we want to request as part of our allocation for the following year based on what we spent this year, and then we justify it with, well, we've done this much community service and this much
gotcha.
fundraising and stuff like that. So there was like these tiers that your club would be kind of grouped into. So there's a pretty incredible amount of organization around that, which
Gotcha.
I don't know if it's always been that way, but at least my 4 years there, that's how it was, and I thought it worked really well.
Nice. Okay. Well, one thing I wanted to ask you is, it sounds like your experience in club sports has definitely informed your ability to kind of work with people and work with teams in the professional workspace. How would you kind of distinguish the lessons you learned in terms of how they translate to the workplace, the lessons you learned in club sports versus the lessons you learned in an internship, and then maybe the lessons one would learn, like say a part-time job while in school? I asked that because I've never worked a part-time job like while in school. I have student leadership experiences, But I guess like the cost benefit was more so like social because, you know, my parents at the end of the day were paying tuition. And so I kind of wonder sometimes, like, had I worked a part-time job, maybe like an administrative like office type of thing while in either undergrad for me or pharmacy school after, like would there have been like an exposure to the maybe missing piece for me in the workplace? So if you could just like speak to your you know your experiences and what informed your ability to function in the workplace and things.
Sure. So, you know, I'll start with the club I actually participated in, right? So I was part of the Taekwondo club at Penn State, and um, you know, my last, my sophomore year I was the secretary, junior year I was vice president, and senior year I was president. And you know, through my progression in the club, I got to see a lot of things from, you know, my other teammates, the other officers, and how they ran the club. I saw a lot of things that worked really well, and some things that, you know, didn't work as well as we expected, in terms of, you know, just our organization, or how, you know, how you may keep new members. I just learned a little bit more about, like, just general awareness of how you, like, the way you may lead, or the way you organize yourselves, or your group, can affect, you know, the larger. So for example, usually when we had, like, when the school year would start, we'd have maybe, like, I think there was probably 2 years where we had maybe 50 or more people show up to the first practice, brand new people, and that's, you know, not including the people who were carried over from the last year. And so we were
Yeah.
like, wow, how do we teach all of these people, you know, at the same time, and give them that level of support, but also that feeling of, like, family that's going to make them want to keep coming back practice after practice. Because you know, my first 2 years we'd have this huge number of people, and then it very quickly dropped off, right? And we maybe had 10 of those first 50 people still there, which is not bad. But you know, if you can keep 50% or more, why, you know, why not? And so I started to kind of think about it. Like, there were groups that I had tried to join, other clubs that I tried to join, where I didn't feel like I was welcomed the same way that I felt I was welcomed when I joined the Taekwondo club. And I have a
Mhm.
kind of an interesting story about how I joined Taekwondo club. But you know, I took that feeling, and so my senior year, when I was kind of in charge of leading the practices, I made sure on the first day of practice we lined all the new people up and paired them with somebody who had already been in the club for at least a year. So instantly you're making a friend with somebody who has already gone through what you're about to go through, right? So there's all of these freshmen and some upperclassmen too, who had never done Taekwondo before, never come to a practice before, and all of a sudden, you know, now they have that one friendly face that they, you know, that they can work with, train with. And so the next time they come back, you know, they already know somebody. They feel a little bit more comfortable than just being the new person, and, you know, not feeling like you belong.
Right.
Um, so there was, like, some of those kinds of things. And then of course, we had a goal from day one. So I lived with my teammates. We
Mhm.
had two apartments right next to each other, so we spent a lot of time together, and we had goals about what we wanted to do. So at the end of every year, the club sports program has an award ceremony. So there's club of the year, athletes of the year, martial arts club of the year, stuff like that. And so we had done pretty well in the past few years, winning martial arts club of the year and
Nice.
some athlete of the year awards and stuff like that. But for me and my teammates, my fellow officers, our goal was we wanted to be the club of the year. And
Right.
that was the number one thing, right? But then we had some, you know, like, once we had thought about that, we had some other goals to kind of help us get there, right? So,
Mm.
you know, when we thought about it, we were like, well, we do pretty well in competitions, but we've never had one on campus here. So we're like, all right, let's host our first ever major tournament here. But now, like, what do we need to do that? We needed scoring systems, we needed
Mm.
mats, we needed all kinds of stuff. And we did pretty well with our funding, but didn't have enough to buy all of that. So we did
Mhm.
like more fundraising than we've ever done before. Um, and like literally everything we did was with that end goal in mind of like, okay, if
Right.
we do really well at this tournament, that's another kind of check on the box to help us get club of the year. If we buy these mats, that allows us to have the tournament, which puts us in better shape. If we get the scoring system and so on and so forth. So that that end goal in mind kept everybody focused. It kept everyone like
Gotcha.
everyone felt like they were contributing to something, which was amazing. And so to kind of bring this all together and take a step back, I had a very non-traditional way of joining a club with Taekwondo. I didn't go to the first practice of the year. I actually hesitated for probably like a month or two,
Hmm.
just being a scared freshman. And but I was on their email listserv, and
Right.
so one of the fundraisers that the club sports get to do is clean up our football stadium after a major football game.
Right.
And so I think if you take a quarter of the stadium, you get I don't know $1,500, $2,000, something like that. And so it was a game. It was after one of like the really big games, and
Hmm.
it was really cold outside, and so no one wanted to come clean the stadium. But it's a big fundraiser, right? If you don't have enough people, they find a different club.
Yeah.
And so there was all these emails going about, hey guys, we need help. And I was like, you know what? I could go help. And so my first day with the club was helping them clean trash out of Beaver Stadium. Uh, and so honestly speaking, the rest of the guys on the team thought I was absolutely insane when they found out that that was my first day
Yeah.
with the team. But it created such a strong bond, right? I
Yeah.
got to talk with them outside of the training setting because I mean, you've done martial arts, right? So when you're in the gym, when you got your uniform on and everything, there's a certain level of um, like seriousness to it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this was like everyone's chill. We're all just having fun. Well,
Right.
I mean, we're cold and cleaning garbage, so not too much fun, but
Right.
it just helped build that camaraderie. So
Right.
anyways, we kept doing that every year as a team bonding and fundraising event. And like I said, it's not a fun event per se,
Hmm.
but when we put that goal in mind of we need this money so we can buy these things, so we can have the tournament, so we can have a better chance of being club of the year.
Right.
I mean, we had such a huge turnout with people, coming.
Yeah.
It was just incredible. So what I learned in terms of how to connect with people when you're
Hmm.
when you're trying to work with them, and um, how you can basically build like put together a goal or a mission that people can buy into.
Yeah.
Any kind of project that you're going to work on, whether it's in a professional setting or academic setting or club setting, it just becomes that much easier to accomplish it.
Right.
And it's funny, when I interviewed for my current job, the guy that was interviewing me, at one point I thought I had messed up my chance because I kept talking about all this experience that I got from the club sports program in Taekwondo, and he was like, "Don't you have any like classes that you want to talk about where you've gained experience?" Or at that
Right.
time I was doing part-time work. He's like, "Don't you want to talk about that a little bit?" And I was like, yeah. I've got some good experience from that, but I really feel like a lot of the success I've had in my career has been because of the things I learned from being part of my club, but
Yeah.
also the club sports program.
Definitely. Yeah. I think something that stuck out to me is, you said your first experience with the club was during a fundraiser for cleaning up the stadium as opposed to attending a practice. And something that stuck out to me that I would not have otherwise thought of was in martial arts in particular, there's a level of composure. You're in uniform. I think it's fair to say that you're not necessarily like your unfiltered self, at least not in the same way when you're kind of picking up trash in a cold stadium. So I wonder if like that's sort of the hidden piece of connection that really facilitated the bond you described. And because like you said, like at a glance it wouldn't be the most intuitive thing, but that makes a lot of sense as to how that fits in with everything. Something I wanted to ask you about is I wanted you to talk about maybe like your journey in literacy of personal finance, because that was a big missing piece for me in like all my student leadership experiences, and like club sports as well. It's like, I understood the needs for fundraising, but I think like, and even for my internships at the NIH, like, I mean, I had my first internship like at age 16. I feel like my dad really just um, looked at the fine print and whatnot. And so when I worked my first job after graduating pharmacy school in 2018, like I was kind of overwhelmed with the detail of like, uh, I don't know, the options for 401k and stuff, and I was still adjusting to the job, like the actual roles and responsibilities of the job itself. Yeah, could you speak to your journey with like learning personal finance? If you, yeah,
I'm still learning.
okay,
um, I had the same experience when I started my internship. I was I think I was 16 or 17, and it was, I don't know why. I'm sure there's like a really good reason why, but at the time I was like, well, this is dumb. I had to sit through a day and a half of orientation, and it was all of these policies, and it was you got to sign these papers, and you got to do this, and you got to do that, and I'd say 80 to 90% of it was over my head. I didn't know what a 401k was. I didn't know, and at the time I was part-time anyway, so wasn't eligible for any of
okay,
that.
yeah,
So I was like, well, I was, it was, the beginning of summer. I was thinking like, should I have just, you know, had a summer off and done something completely different.
right,
So I wasn't like fully focused on what was going on in that training anyways. Again, mostly because it was over my head. But I think once I got that first paycheck, I was like, all right, well, I could spend it all right now because it feels pretty good to make some decent money and
hmm,
not have a whole lot of you know, not a whole lot of responsibility on me right now, or I can save it. Um, and so, I've been kind of figuring that stuff out as I go, right? So
gotcha,
save my money, and um, I think I really started to get a sense of like how to manage my own money when I went to college, because after my freshman year, I started living off campus.
mm,
So I had, apartment rent and utilities to pay. And towards the end of my sophomore year, I was fortunate enough to like have a car on campus as well. So then there was like parking, there was gas, there was maintenance on the
mm,
car. Um, so there was, a lot of things like that. And then I learned even more through my club, right? Because we had to do our budgets and kind of understand like how much is it going to cost for us to get from campus to a tournament. How much, like, I had to help with getting apparel made. So when we got
yeah,
our team jackets and equipment,
yeah,
um, even like doing like the paperwork when people would submit their like what's it called, gas mileage and reimbursements and that kind of stuff,
ah,
like just kind of putting all of that together and realizing like, okay, we've got this much in our pot right now, here's how much is going to go away. um, and then we got to do this fundraising, so like just trying to comprehend all of that along with my personal finances. And I had some hiccups along the way too. There were a couple times where I had to pay a much larger bill than I should have, just because of bad money management. Um, so it's kind of been, um, some of my coworkers have this acronym OJT, on the job training, right? So it's pretty much been
hmm,
the same thing in terms of finances, right? I've just kind of been
gotcha,
learning as I go. But actually, at work recently, so I help lead my company's emerging professionals group, and I think actually a month or two ago now, um, we we held a financial literacy seminar,
Ah,
and PNC actually did a virtual like webinar for us and how to manage money and stuff like that. So I've always felt like I've managed mine okay, but
gotcha.
I know that there's a lot of other people who are big in like investing and
Right.
trading and stuff like that, which I've not taken advantage of. So it's something that I need to learn more about.
Right. Yeah, I'm not there either. I mean, I have, like you said, friends that mention the trading stuff and Robinhood and apps like that. And yeah, that's a frontier. I've honestly been pretty kind of scared of that stuff. But I mean, in general, just because there's so much like that I don't know. And I think one nuance that stuck out to me from your experience is that I've never actually lived off campus in any of my schooling, with the exception of study abroad and like living at home, like home, with my folks for like the latter year of pharmacy school. And even with those exceptions, like for the study abroad, like uh, I think the core of those like logistics and um I guess the the one that's paying the bills at the end of the day is either like the school through some kind of reimbursement or my folks. And I think that what you described with just managing the day to day with like gas and living off campus and in a spot where you've got to maybe manage those sort of adults like periodic bills of sorts. Yeah, I think that that's sort of a nuance that was kind of missing from my experience, because for me it's like on campus housing was just tied up with the rest of the, I don't know, like the schooling tuition stuff, and you just kind of click certain buttons, and at the end of the day my my my
Right.
my dad would just kind of take care of it, I guess. Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Sid. It was really great pleasure having you on. I'm so inspired by the different achievements you have and the accolades you have, in terms of what you're doing and what you've done with club sports. And thank you so much. Thank you, Sid.
Yeah, man. I'm glad to be able to do this. Thanks.
Definitely.